Kick it in. She's just a woman. Victor Kane's boot split Claire Whitmore's front door at 3 in the morning. He dragged a gut-shot elk across her floor, let it bleed out on her boards, and carved "Go home" into the wood slow enough that she'd hear every stroke. No husband, no gun, no spine, he told his men while they laughed. She quit her war. She doesn't get to guard a mountain. He spat on her welcome mat and walked out through the fence he'd torn down with a truck. 10 days later, 4 of those men crossed her fence again. None of them ever came back. If you enjoy stories about people the world underestimates, please subscribe to the channel and stay with me until the very end. And comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The knife marks in the door read, "Go home."
Claire Whitmore stood in front of them at 6 in the morning with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched, and she didn't feel anger. That surprised her. She'd expected anger. What she felt instead was a slow, cold arithmetic starting up somewhere in the back of her skull, a machine she'd shut down 2 years ago and had promised herself she'd never start again.
4 men, 1 truck, 16 minutes on the property according to the timestamps. They'd known where the cameras were because they'd looked directly into 3 of them and ignored the other 2 entirely. That last part was the problem. "Ma'am, I'm gonna be honest with you." Deputy Trent Bowers stood at the bottom of her steps with his thumbs in his belt, looking at the elk like it was a parking violation. "This is a hunting town. Boys get drunk. Boys get stupid." "They cut my fence with a vehicle. They knocked over a section of it. 200 feet of it," Claire said. "That's not knocking over. That's a decision."
Bowers sighed the way men sigh when they've already decided you're going to be difficult. He was maybe 40 thick through the shoulders, and he'd been perfectly polite to her at the feed store in April, and perfectly polite to her at the post office in May, and she was starting to understand that polite in this town was a wall with a nice coat of paint on it. "You bought 3,000 acres people have been walking across for 60 years, he said. "You put up signs, you put up wire. Folks around here, they take that personal. I bought it legally. Nobody's saying you didn't. You're saying it right now, deputy. You're just saying it slow." He looked at her then, really looked for maybe the first time. Claire was 5'6" and 130 pounds, and she wore a canvas jacket she'd owned for 9 years, and she knew exactly what he saw. A woman alone, a woman who'd paid too much for bad land, a woman who probably cried at night and would be gone by the first hard winter. "You want to file a report? I'll file a report," he said. "I want you to look at the elk." "I'm looking at it." "No, you're not." She came down 2 steps. "Look at the entry wound." Bowers glanced down, then back up, humoring her. "It's a bullet hole. It's a bullet hole in the neck at C2, left side. It's the size of my thumbnail, and there's no exit cavity worth the name, which means it was a soft point going slow, which means somebody put a round through a running elk's spine at what I'd guess was 200 yards in the dark, and the animal dropped where it stood and never made a sound." Claire's voice never rose. "Drunk boys don't shoot like that. Drunk boy gut shoot an animal and chase it 3 miles and lose it. Somebody on that crew is very, very good, and he wanted me to know it." For 4 full seconds, Deputy Trent Bowers didn't say anything at all. Then he laughed. Not cruelly. That was almost worse. He laughed like a man watching a child explain airplanes. "Ma'am," he said, "where'd you learn all that?" Claire looked at him for a long moment. "Magazines," she said. The story went around town before lunch, and by the time she walked into Handel's Hardware at 2, the version they had was that the crazy lady on Redmond Ridge had lectured a sheriff's deputy about ballistics because somebody left roadkill on her porch. She heard it from the aisle. 2 men by the register, not even lowering their voices. Said she could tell the caliber by looking. "Come on." "Swear to God." Bowers said she got real intense about it. "Well, she's up there alone, ain't she? People get funny alone." Claire set a spool of 12-gauge wire on the counter, and the men stopped to talking, and the older one had the grace to color a little around the ears. "That everything," the kid behind the register asked. 4 spools, and I need the heavy staples, not those." "4's a lot of wire. I've got a lot of fence." The older man at the end of the counter cleared his throat. "You're going to want to think about that, miss." "Ma'am," Claire said. "What?" "You called me miss. I'm 31. It's ma'am." He blinked. All right, ma'am, you're going to want to think about that fence. Folks here hunted that ridge when your daddy was in short pants. Rebuilding it just tells them you didn't get the message. I got the message, Claire said. I'm sending one back. She paid in cash and carried the wire out herself. All 4 spools, 90 pounds of it, in 2 trips that she made look like one, and neither man offered to help, and she didn't want them to. She rebuilt the fence in 11 hours. She did not stop for lunch. Somewhere around the 4th hour, she understood that she was not rebuilding a fence. She was doing what she had always done when she was afraid, which was to find the most physical possible expression of a decision and then commit her body to it so completely that the decision could never be taken back. At dusk, she stood at the last post and looked at the tree line and said out loud to nobody, "Okay." That night at 2:14 a.m., camera 9 went dark. Camera 9 was not one of the cameras they had looked at. Claire was awake before the alert finished chiming. She didn't turn on a light. She didn't reach for a weapon. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark with her laptop on her knees, and she watched the last 4 seconds of camera 9's life, and then she watched them again, and then a third time at quarter speed. A hand entered the frame, gloved. It didn't grab the camera. It didn't smash it. It reached past the lens, found the cable, and separated it at the junction, a clean pull. No yank, the kind of motion you use when you want the housing intact so nobody sees a hole from a distance. And in the last frame before the feed died in the top left corner out of focus, there was a shoulder patch. Not a hunting jacket, not flannel, a subdued patch on a plate carrier. Claire closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. "They're not poachers," she said. "Oh, yes." Her father used to say that a person could learn everything they needed to know about a stranger by how the stranger walks across ground they don't own. Claire had spent 9 years in a job that turned that saying into a science. At 3:40 a.m. she went out, not with a rifle. That was the thing she'd remember later, the thing she'd have to explain to people who couldn't understand it. She went out with a thermal monocular and a notebook and a pencil because she wasn't hunting them. She was reading them. She lay in a fold of ground 400 yards above the North Cut for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and she did not move, and she barely breathed. And she watched 6 men work a grid in the dark with red lights and hand signals, and no talking, and she felt something in her chest that she genuinely could not name. They were good. They were so good. 2 on security facing outward, staggered so their sectors overlapped. 4 working a search pattern with what she was almost certain was ground-penetrating radar on a wheeled cart. Nobody bunched up, nobody smoked, nobody checked a phone. When one man knelt, the man behind him adjusted his position without being told, without a word, without even a look. That wasn't a hunting party. That wasn't even a crew of thugs. That was a unit. At 5:40 minutes before civil twilight, the man on the left flank raised one closed fist, and every one of them was gone inside 90 seconds, and they'd policed the ground so completely that Claire, walking the site an hour later in daylight, found exactly 2 things. 1, a scuff in the lichen where the radar cart had turned. 2, a spent cigarette filter pressed into the mud under a rock deliberately where nobody would ever find it unless they were looking for a man's one bad habit. Claire crouched over it a long time. "So one of you isn't perfect," she said. She bagged it with a pen in a sandwich bag, and she walked home 11 miles the long way around, because the short way was the way anybody watching would expect. "You want me to run a DNA test?" Deputy Bauer said on a cigarette. "Yes. On a cigarette you found in the woods." "On a cigarette I found in the woods in my property under a rock where a man hid it because he'd been trained not to leave litter and he couldn't quit smoking." Bowers rubbed his eyes with 2 fingers. Behind him, the office coffee maker gurgled. Sheriff Dale Ammons was in the doorway pretending to read a form. "Ma'am, do you know what a DNA panel costs?" $410 at the state lab. "I'll pay it." That got his head up. "I want it in the system," Claire said. "That's all. I don't need you to believe me. I need a chain of custody and a case number so that when this goes bad, somebody can look back and see that it started here." Sheriff Ammons finally spoke without turning around. "When it goes bad." "Yes, sir." "That's a hell of a thing to say about your neighbors." "They're not my neighbors, Sheriff. My neighbors are the Delgados and the old man with the mules. Whoever's on my mountain at 3 a.m. ran a 6-man element with radar and comms discipline that would embarrass most active duty platoons I've worked with." She kept her voice absolutely flat. "That's not a neighbor. That's an operation. Ammons turned around slowly. He was 62 years old and he had a face like a dry riverbed, and he looked at her for a long, long moment, and Claire watched him decide something. Worked with, he said. Yes, sir. You said worked with, not seen on TV, not read about. That's right. What did you do, Miss Whitmore? Ma'am, Bowers muttered, and Claire almost smiled. I was in the Navy, she said. Doing what? And there it was, the question she'd driven 1,800 miles to never answer again. Sheriff, Claire said, if I tell you, you'll either not believe me or you'll believe me and tell somebody, and it'll be in the diner by Thursday, and then everybody in this county will have an opinion about me instead of about the 6 men with night vision on the ridge. She set the sandwich bag on the desk. Run the cigarette, please. Ammons looked at the bag, then he picked it up. Bowers, he said, log it. Sheriff, log it. The land office was a room with 2 desks and 40 years of dust, and the clerk was a woman named Marjorie Pike, who had worked there since 1988 and who lit up like Christmas morning when Claire said the words original survey. Oh, honey, nobody asked for the originals. Everybody wants the digital, and the digital's wrong. Wrong how? Wrong because a boy from Helena scanned it in 2004, and the boy was 19 and it was August. Marjorie was already climbing a ladder she had no business climbing. Redmond Ridge, you said 3,000 acres, parcel 41 through 49. The ladder creaked. That's the Hollis parcel. That's a strange one. Claire's stomach went very still. Strange how Marjorie came down with a book the size of a car door and dropped it on the desk hard enough to make the lamp jump. Well, she said, opening it, because for 22 years it wasn't the Hollis parcel. It wasn't anybody's parcel. She ran a finger down a column. 1954 to 1976, the counties got no assessment on it. 0, not exempt, not zero value, just blank. Blank. Like somebody tore the page out of the book, Marjorie said cheerfully. Except they didn't tear it out. They just wrote nothing for 22 years. Claire leaned over the ledger. She looked at 22 years of nothing. What's this notation here? She said. In the margin. Marjorie squinted. That's not county. That's federal. That's a Bureau of Land Management withdrawal stamp. She frowned. That's odd. Withdrawal stamps got a purpose code. That one's blank too. Marjorie. Who owned my land in 1961. The clerk turned 3 pages and stopped, and Claire watched the cheerfulness drain right out of her face. The United States Army, Marjorie said quietly. Corps of Engineers, Detachment 7. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The radiator ticked. Honey, Marjorie said, there's no army, anything within 200 miles of here. There never was. I know, Claire said. So what were they doing on your mountain? That's the question. She drove home with photographs of 9 ledger pages on her phone and a feeling in her chest like a wire pulling tight, and she was 2 miles up her own road when a black pickup came around the bend and stopped nose to nose with her. Claire stopped. She did not put it in reverse. She did not honk. She put her truck in park, and she put both hands on the wheel where they could be seen, and she waited. The man who got out of the black pickup was maybe 50. Silver at the temples. Good boots, not new, not cheap, broken in the way boots break in when a man actually walks in them. He came up to her window with his hands empty and an open and a smile that had been designed in a laboratory. Claire rolled the window down 4 inches. Ms. Whitmore. He said her name like they were old friends. Victor Kane. You're on my road? I am. He didn't apologize. I wanted to introduce myself properly. There was an incident at your home the other night. Some of my associates, they were out of line. Your associates? Contractors? Hard men? Bad manners? He shrugged. I've handled it. You carved a message into my door. I did no such thing. You did, Claire said. You held the knife left-handed and you were in a hurry, so the second stroke on the G is heavier at the top. And your right hand had the elk's hind leg, which is why there's blood on the door frame at shoulder height on that side only. She looked at his left hand on her window frame, at the callus. You want to try again? Victor Kane's smile did something interesting. It didn't go away. It just stopped being a smile while remaining technically a smile. Huh, he said. Get off my road. I'd like to make you an offer. Get off my road. $2.4 million, Kane said. For land, you paid $600,000 for. Cash. Close in 11 days. You walk away 4 times richer than you came, and you never think about Montana again. And there it was, the thing that turned Claire's spine to ice. Not the money, the number. I paid $640,000, she said quietly. Excuse me. I paid $640,000, not $600, and it wasn't public. It was a private sale through an estate trust, and the county doesn't post estate transfers for 18 months. She turned her head and looked at him. So how do you know what I paid? Kane held her eyes. For the first time, he looked at her the way she'd been waiting all week for someone to look at her. Not at a woman alone, not at a crazy lady with a fence, at a problem. Take the money, Claire, he said. How do you know what I paid? Take the money. You didn't find my mountain, Claire said slowly, and she heard her own voice go somewhere very far away and very calm. You've been on it a long time. You've been on it longer than I have. And when it went up for sale, you couldn't buy it because a purchase creates a record, and a record creates a question, and you can't afford a question. Kane said nothing. You needed somebody to buy it, she said. Somebody quiet, somebody isolated, somebody with no family calling, nobody visiting, nobody asking. Somebody who'd put up a fence and keep everybody else out for you. Something moved behind Victor Kane's eyes. You needed a caretaker, Claire whispered. You didn't want me gone. You wanted me exactly where I am. And Victor Kane smiled, really smiled this time, wide and warm and utterly delighted, like a man who has just found out the dog can talk. You know, he said, they told me you were sharp. Who told you? He stepped back from the window. Who told you, Kane? He walked back toward his truck, unhurried, and Claire was out of her door before she decided to be standing in the middle of her own road with her hands at her sides. Who told you? Kane opened his door, paused, looked back at her over the roof of the black pickup. 11 days, he said. Then the offer changes. Changes to what? To an eviction, said Victor Kane. And she didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table with the ledger photographs in a legal pad, and she built a timeline the way she'd built target packages for 9 years, and at 4 a.m. she had 4 facts, and they were all worse than the last. Fact 1, her mountain had been federal blacked out from 1954 to 1976. Fact 2, whatever was there had never been publicly decommissioned because there was no decommissioning record because there was no record at all. Fact 3, Victor Kane's crew wasn't looking for it. They already knew roughly where it was. They were surveying the ground above it, which meant they weren't searching. They were planning an entry. And fact 4, the one that made her hands cold, Kane had known the sale price, which meant somebody with access to a sealed estate trust had given it to him, which meant this had not started when they cut her fence. It had started before she'd ever heard the word Montana. Claire put down her pencil. Somebody sold me this mountain on purpose, she said to the empty room. At 5:15 a.m., she made a phone call she'd sworn she would never make. It rang 4 times. You have the wrong number, a man's voice said. Rafael. Wes, a pause, long enough that she heard him sit up. Whit, Wesley Duarte said. Whit, is that Jesus? Jesus Christ, it's been 2 years. I need something. You need Claire, you fell off the earth. You didn't come to Reyes's funeral. You didn't answer a single Wes. No, not one call, not one text, and now it's 5 in the morning and you need something. Claire closed her eyes. Yes, she said. And Wesley Duarte, who had spent 406 days of his life within arm's reach of her, in places neither of them would ever name out loud, made a sound that was half a laugh and half something much worse. Okay, he said. Okay, what do you need? I need you to look at a name. Who's Victor Kane? The silence on the other end of the line went from warm to absolutely arctic in about a second and a half. Wes, where'd you get that name? He said. He's on my property. Claire, where are you? Montana. Where in Montana? Wes, what is it? Who is he? Asama. Claire listened to me very carefully. Duarte's voice had gone completely flat, and she knew that voice. She'd heard that voice through a wall of gunfire in a stairwell in a country that officially didn't have Americans in it, and hearing it now in her own warm kitchen made every hair on her arm stand up. Victor Kane is not a criminal. He tore down my fence. Victor Kane is on a list, Duarte said, and the list is not a criminal list. Do you understand what I'm telling you? He's not a guy who went bad. He's a guy who never stopped. Never stopped what? Get out of the house, Duarte said. What? Claire, get out of the house right now. Wes. He knows you called me, Duarte said. Within about 90 seconds, he's going to know you called me because that's what he does. That's what he's for. And if he came to your door and offered you money, then you've already got maybe 70 of those seconds left. Claire was moving before he finished the sentence. She had her boots and her jacket, and she was out the back door and 40 yards into the tree line in 19 seconds, and she went flat behind a deadfall with her heart hammering and her phone still hot in her hand, and she lay there in the dark, breathing through her mouth, feeling absolutely spectacularly insane. Nothing happened. For 1 minute, nothing happened. For 2 minutes, nothing happened. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, Claire Whitmore started to feel foolish in a way she hadn't felt since she was 19 years old, and she actually began to push herself up off the ground. That was when she heard the engine. Not a truck engine. Something smaller, quieter. Something running down low and slow along her fence line with no lights at all. And Claire pressed herself back into the earth and watched a shape she couldn't identify move past her cabin at a walking pace and stop. And sit there, idling. For 11 minutes, whatever it was, sat idling 40 yards from her back door, and Claire lay in the wet leaves with a phone she couldn't use and no weapon and no plan, and understood with total clarity that if she had stayed in her bed, she would not have been in her bed anymore. At 5:41 a.m., the engine moved off. At 5:44, her phone buzzed against her chest. A text, unknown number, 4 words. 10 days now, Claire. Sim. She walked back into her own kitchen at first light and stood in the doorway a long time looking at nothing. Then she went to the closet in the back bedroom, the one she hadn't opened since the day she moved in, and she pulled out a case she'd promised her therapist and her mother and herself that she would never open again. Claire set it on the kitchen table. She looked at it. "I'm not this anymore," she said out loud. The case didn't argue. She thought about the elk on her porch. She thought about Bowers laughing. She thought about a 19-year-old boy in Helena scanning a page in August in 22 blank years, and a man with good boots who knew what she'd paid for her own land. And she thought about Wesley Duarte saying he's not a guy who went bad, he's a guy who never stopped. Claire opened the case. Inside in cut foam was a rifle she had built with her own hands over 4 years, and she had not touched it in 731 days. And when she lifted it out, her hands did not shake even slightly, and that was the thing that finally made her eyes sting, because it meant it had never left. She had driven 1,800 miles and bought 3,000 acres and rebuilt a fence with her own back to get away from a woman she thought she'd buried. And the woman had been sitting in the closet the whole time, waiting, perfectly patient, perfectly calm. "Okay, May," Claire said thickly. "Okay." She sat down at her kitchen table with the rifle across her knees, and she pulled the legal pad toward her, and she wrote at the top of a clean page in block capitals the first honest sentence she'd written in 2 years. "Whoever sold me this mountain knew." Then she wrote a second line under it, and that one was a name. Because at 6:02 that morning, sitting in the wreckage of the peaceful life she'd tried so hard to build, Claire Whitmore finally remembered where she'd heard the phrase estate trust before. She remembered the lawyer's office in Bozeman. She remembered the man who'd handled the paperwork, who'd been so kind, so patient, who'd walked her through every page and told her she was getting a beautiful piece of country and that she'd earned some quiet. She remembered his cufflinks, Marine Corps, Eagle Globe and Anchor, and she remembered the name on the door, R. Hawthorne Esquire. Claire stared at the 2 words she'd written for a very long time. Then she set down the pencil and she said to a house full of nothing but dust and morning light and the ghost of the woman she used to be, "You sold me a grave colonel." She was on the road to Bozeman by 6:40 that morning, with the rifle case locked in the back and the legal pad on the passenger seat, and she drove the whole 140 miles at exactly the speed limit because a woman who has just decided to do something enormous should never give anybody a reason to stop her. At 9:02, she walked into a law office with a mahogany door and a receptionist who had been trained to smile at grief. "Do you have an appointment with Mr. Hawthorne?" "No. He's with a client until 11. I'm so sorry I could." "Tell him Claire Whitmore's here about parcel 41. The smile didn't change. But the woman's hand stopped moving toward the appointment book, and she looked up, and something happened in her face that Claire had seen exactly twice in her life, both times overseas, both times on the faces of people who had been told what to do if a specific person ever showed up. "He's been expecting you," the receptionist said quietly. Claire's stomach dropped straight through the floor. "Excuse me. He said if you ever came, I wasn't to make you wait. For how long, and ma'am, how long has he been expecting me?" The receptionist swallowed. "Since March," she said. Claire had signed the deed in April. The door opened before she reached it. He was 74 years old, 6'2", and still standing like the last 40 years had been a negotiation he'd won, and he had a cane he clearly resented and a handshake he did not offer. "Ms. Whitmore, Colonel Hawthorne, it's Mr. in this room." "No, sir," Claire said. "It isn't." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back from his own doorway. "Come in," said Colonel Richard Hawthorne. "Shut the door." She didn't sit. He did slowly, and he was careful about it in a way that told her something, and she filed it and said nothing. "You cut your hair," he said. Claire went absolutely still. "You've never met me." "No." "Then how do you know me to cut my hair?" Hawthorne opened a drawer and set a folder on the desk between them, and he did it gently the way a man sets down something he's been carrying too long. "Because I have 411 pages on you," he said, "and I've read every one of them 9 times, and in the photograph from Bagram, in 2019 your hair is longer." Claire looked at the folder. She did not touch it. "You sold me that mountain," she said. "Yes." "You sold me that mountain knowing what's under it." "Yes." "You sold me a grave, Colonel." And Richard Hawthorne, who in 2014 had sat in front of a Senate subcommittee and said on camera, on the record in a voice like a slammed door, that the day this country put women in direct ground combat billets was the day it started writing checks. Its daughters would have to cash. Richard Hawthorne looked up at her with wet eyes and said, "No, Lieutenant, I sold you a battlefield." "Don't call me that." "I sold you a battlefield," and he said, "because I've been holding it alone for 51 years and I'm dying, and you're the only person on this earth I could think of who might be able to hold it after me." The clock on his wall ticked 11 times before Claire could speak. "You said women couldn't do this job," she said. "I did." "You said it in front of Congress." "I did." "My mother watched that hearing," Claire said, and her voice cracked right down the middle, and she hated it. She hated it. She hated that after all these years it still had that much left in it. "My mother watched a Marine colonel with a chest full of ribbons tell the United States government that her daughter was a check somebody would have to cash. She called me that night. She asked me if it was true." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I'd already cashed it," Claire said. "Twice." Hawthorne closed his eyes. "I know," he said. "It's on page 190. At 9:31, he poured himself a glass of water with a hand that shook badly enough to rattle the pitcher, and Claire watched him not apologize for it, and she understood 2 things at once. He was very ill, and he had been waiting a very long time for somebody to be angry at him in person. "Sit down," he said. "No. Ms. Whitmore, I'm about to tell you something that 11 men have died to keep quiet, and I'd rather not do it while you loom." "Then talk faster." He laughed. It turned into a cough. The cough went on longer than it should have. "In 1954, he said, when he could, the Army Corps of Engineers took 9,000 acres of Redmond Ridge under a land withdrawal with no purpose code. You saw that. Marjorie showed you the ledger. Good woman, terrible at secrets." "You know about Marjorie." "I know about everything on that mountain," Hawthorne said. "That's the entire tragedy of my life, if you want it in one sentence. In 1961, they finished a facility 1,100 feet inside the North Face, 240 personnel. Not a missile site, not a bunker, a storage and testing installation for a program that has never been declassified because it was never classified because it was never written down. It didn't have a name. It had a phone number. What was in it? I'll get there. What was in it, Colonel? In 1971, Hawthorne said, ignoring her completely, a first lieutenant, 23 years old, took over the security detachment. 12 Marines. My orders were 4 sentences long. Nobody goes in, nobody comes out, nothing leaves. Report only to the number. He looked at his water glass. I ran that gate for 5 years, and I never once went inside, and I never once asked, because in 1971, that was what a good officer was. A good officer was a man who did not ask. And then Mani on them. And then in 1976, the phone number stopped answering. Claire's skin went cold. What do you mean it stopped answering? I mean, I called it on a Tuesday, and it rang, Hawthorne said. I called it Wednesday, and it rang. I called it every day for 6 weeks, and it rang and rang and rang, and nobody ever picked it up again. No orders, no relief, no trucks, no pay eventually, which is how I finally understood. He set the glass down. We had been forgotten, Ms. Whitmore. Not shut down, not decommissioned. Forgotten. Somebody in a building in Virginia retired, and the only man who knew we existed went out the door with his box of pictures, and that was that. That's not possible. It happened 11 times in the Cold War that I can document, Hawthorne said, and those are the ones somebody eventually remembered. I've spent 50 years wondering how many nobody remembered. What did you do? I held the gate. For how long? Until 1979, he said. 3 years, 12 Marines, then 9, then 4. We ate elk. We ate a lot of elk. 2 of my men walked off and I let them go, and I have never told anyone that. In 79, a corporal named Boyle got appendicitis, and I put him in a truck and drove him 90 miles, and when I came back, the seals on the north door had been cut. By who? By my own men, Hawthorne said, because they'd been standing outside a door for 8 years, and they finally wanted to know what they were standing outside of. And he looked at her, and 4 of them went in, he said, and 2 came out. At 9:48, Claire Whitmore sat down. What's in the mountain, Colonel? I don't know. I don't know, he said, and his voice went up for the first time, cracked and furious, in 74 years old. That's the answer. That's the whole answer. I never went in. Sergeant Pell came out, and he wouldn't tell me. He would not tell me. And 11 days later, he put a pistol in his mouth in his mother's garage in Wichita. And Corporal Vance came out and told me one thing and one thing only, and then never spoke another word about it as long as he lived. What did he say? Hawthorne's jaw worked. He said, sir, they left it running. Claire didn't move. Left what running? I have asked myself that question, Hawthorne said quietly, every single night for 47 years. At 10:15, he pushed the folder across the desk and told her to open it, and she did. And the first thing inside was a photograph of Victor Kane at maybe 30 years old in a uniform, in a country with mountains, standing next to a man whose face had been cut out of the picture with scissors. He was ours, Hawthorne said. That's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Victor Kane isn't a criminal who got good. He's an asset who got loose. 22 years of work that doesn't exist, and then a program folds, and a man like that doesn't get a pension and a plaque. He gets a phone that stops ringing. He tapped the photo. Sound familiar? You're telling me you feel sorry for him. I'm telling you, I understand him, Hawthorne said. And that's worse, and that's why you should be terrified. Kane isn't after money. Kane found out that there is a hole in the world where a government program used to be, and he has spent 9 years digging at it, and the day he gets inside that mountain, he will own something that no one on earth can admit exists, which means no one on earth can take it back from him. Then why did you sell it to me? Claire's voice came out ragged. You had it. You could have burned it, buried it, poured concrete down the throat of it. With what money? Hawthorne roared and slammed his hand on the desk and then sat there, breathing hard, an old dying man in a nice office. With what money, Lieutenant? On a retired colonel's pension. I bought that land in 1991 with everything I had and my wife's money and my father's house, and I held it with a fence in a lake and 40 years of paperwork. And I am 74 years old with 11 months of liver left and a son in the ground. And Victor Kane came to my office in this building in January and sat in that chair you're sitting in and told me he'd wait. The room rang. Wait for what? Claire whispered. For me to die, Hawthorne said. He was very polite about it. He said he had time and I didn't. Claire looked down at her own hands. So you needed somebody to inherit a war, she said. I needed somebody who'd notice, Hawthorne said. Boom. That's all. I swear to God, that's all I let myself hope for. Every buyer who came through that door for 3 years I ran, and they were dentists and they were developers, and they were nice people from Seattle who wanted a view. And then a woman with a sealed DD 214 and a silver star. She never picked up, put in an offer site unseen in cash on 3,000 acres of nothing, and asked exactly one question. What question? You asked me about the sight lines, Hawthorne said. Nobody asked about the sight lines. You looked at a topographic map of a mountain you had never seen, and you said, why is the north face cleared to 1,100 meters when the whole ridge is timber? Claire remembered saying it. She remembered it the way you remember something you said in your sleep. And I sat in this chair, Hawthorne said, and I looked at a 31-year-old woman who had spotted a 50-year-old fields of fire cut on a paper map in 11 seconds, and I thought, God help me. God help me, there she is. You should have told me. You'd have run. I'd have run there, Claire shouted, and she was on her feet without knowing she had stood, because I'd earned running colonel. I put 9 years and 2 friends and everything I had left into that job, and I got out with my hands shaking, and I bought a mountain to be quiet on. I know. And you sat there with your cufflinks and your kind voice, and you told me I'd earned some quiet. I know. And you knew what you were handing me. You looked at me and you saw a rifle. Hawthorne didn't flinch. Yes, he said, and that somehow was the thing that took all the air out of her. At 10:40, she stood in his office with her back to him and looked at nothing at all, and behind her, the old man said the only thing he ever said to her that sounded like an apology. I have been wrong exactly twice in my life in a way that mattered, Hawthorne said. The first time I was 23 and I didn't ask what I was guarding. The second time I was 62 and I sat in front of a microphone and said something about your mother's daughter. A pause. I have never had the chance to fix the first one. Claire turned around. Say it, she said. Miss Whitmore.
Behind them, in a sporting goods store at South Park Mall, 9 people stood around a man sitting on a bench, and nobody said anything at all. Outside, Maya grabbed Jordan's arm with both hands. Jordan. What? Jordan. What? There were 4 phones, Maya said. Jordan stopped walking. 4, Maya said. Jordan. There were 4 phones. Elena kept walking 3 steps, then stopped. She turned around.
I was wrong, he said. You are the finest rifle this country ever built. And I said on television that you shouldn't exist, and I was wrong, and I have wanted to tell you that for 6 years. Nobody breathed. Then Claire said, that's not a sentence about me. That's a sentence about you. And she walked out.
Jordan's stomach dropped. There is no winning this, Elena said. There's only what happens next. What does that mean? Elena's phone was already ringing in her hand. It means by tomorrow morning, half this country is going to know my name, she said. And I'm active duty. And Jordan Mitchell, standing in the middle of South Park Mall holding a shoebox she'd saved 2 months for, watched her mother's face while somebody on the other end picked up. Colonel, Elena said. It's Mitchell. I need to get ahead of something. Colonel Marcus Reyes had been eating a sandwich. That was the first thing Elena Mitchell learned standing in the middle of South Park Mall with her daughter holding a shoebox and her best friend's kid vibrating next to her. Mitchell, it's Saturday. I know, sir. I'm eating a sandwich in my own house on a Saturday. I know, sir. I need to get ahead of something. There was a pause on the other end, and Elena heard a plate go down on a counter. Say it. There was an incident 15 minutes ago. Sporting goods store, South Park Mall. Off-duty CMPD officer harassed my daughter. I was in uniform. There were phones. How many phones? 4 that I saw. Another pause. Longer. Were you in uniform the entire time? Yes, sir. Did you identify yourself by rank? No, sir. He read my name tag. Did you touch him? No. Did you raise your voice? No, sir. Did you say anything you'd be embarrassed to hear read out loud in a conference room in Washington? Elena watched a family walk past with pretzels. I said, half this country's got the same picture, she said. The silence on that one lasted 4 seconds.
That's the thing. Duarte's voice went strange. Whit, I need you to sit down. I'm sitting on a floor in a parking garage, West just Telsey. The DNA on that cigarette belongs to Sergeant Daniel R. Hawthorne, United States Marine Corps. A long pause. Killed in action, Helmand Province, June 11th, 2011. The garage went very quiet. Say that again, Claire whispered. He's dead, Duarte said. He's been dead for 15 years. There's a headstone, there's a folded flag, there's a casualty report with a photo I am looking at right now, and Claire, the man in this photo, is 38 years old today. If he's a day, and somebody with his exact DNA was smoking a cigarette under a rock on your mountain last Tuesday. Claire couldn't feel her hands. Hawthorne, she said. What? Say the name again. Daniel R. Hawthorne. His father, Claire said, and her voice didn't sound like her own, just told me he had a son in the ground. At 11:07 in the morning, Claire Whitmore got up off the floor of that parking garage and walked back into that building, and she did not take the elevator. She took 9 flights of stairs, 2 at a time, and she went through Richard Hawthorne's door hard enough to bounce it off the wall, and the receptionist made a sound, and Claire didn't hear it. Hawthorne was still standing where she'd left him. He looked at her face, and something in him just folded. You know, he said. How long? Ms. Whitmore. How long have you known your son is alive? And Colonel Richard Hawthorne, who had held a gate in the wilderness for 3 years after his country forgot him, sat down in his chair like a man cut off at the knees and said 9 years. Claire put both hands on his desk. Talk. Danny went in with 3/5, Hawthorne said, staring at nothing. He was 23, same age I was when they gave me that mountain, and I have thought about that number every day since. In June of 11, I got 2 Marines at my front door and a casualty report and a closed casket, and I buried my son with full honors, and I stood there and I took the flag and I said thank you, and then I went home and I didn't speak for 4 months. And in 2017, a man came to my office, Hawthorne said, and said his name was Victor Kane and he wanted to buy my land, and when I said no, he put a photograph on my desk. Danny, 6 years older, sitting at a table in a place with palm trees alive, with a cup of coffee in his hand and a look on his face that I have never been able to stop seeing. That's a fake. That's leverage. That's the oldest. But he had a video, Ms. Whitmore. Hawthorne's voice broke. 20 seconds. My boy laughing at something off camera. You cannot fake the way your own son laughs. You cannot. I have watched it 4,000 times. What did Kane want? Access. And you said no. I said no. Hawthorne said for 9 years, and every year on June 11th, there's a new photograph in my mail, and he's older in every one. Claire's mind was moving now, fast and cold and terrible, the machine running full out. Colonel, she said, listen to me. Look at me. This is important. Did Kane ever say your son works for him? No. Did Kane ever put him on the phone? No, never. He said, Hawthorne stopped. He said what? He said Danny didn't want to talk to me, Hawthorne whispered. Colonel. Claire crouched down beside the desk, so he had to look at her. Kane doesn't have your son. You don't. Kane doesn't have him, she said. If Kane had a hostage, he'd have used a hostage. You don't hold a man's dead son for 9 years and never let him hear a voice. 9 years of photographs and no proof of life. That's not leverage, sir. That's recruitment. Hawthorne's face went gray. Somebody's smoking cigarettes on my mountain, Claire said, and hiding them under rocks so nobody finds them. That's not a prisoner. Prisoners don't run security. Colonel, whoever's out there on that ridge is on the flank of a 6-man element with muzzle discipline that I would have signed for, and he's been on my land for 6 weeks and he has not touched me, and I could not figure out why. Stop. He's been on my land and he has not touched me. Stop it. And now I know why, Claire said. Because he's standing in front of a door his father stood in front of for 8 years doing the exact same thing for the exact same reason. And Victor Kane isn't blackmailing you with your son. She said the last part very quietly. He's using you to keep the mountain warm until your son's ready to open it. Richard Hawthorne made a sound that was not a word. At 11:24, the office phone rang. Nobody moved. It rang again. The receptionist's voice came over the intercom, thin and wrong. Mr. Hawthorne, there's a sir. There's a Sheriff Ammons on line 2 from Redmond County, and he says it's an emergency, and he's asking for a Claire Whitmore, and he says she needs to pick up right now. Claire took the phone. Ammons. Whitmore. The old man's voice had aged 10 years and 5 hours. Where are you? Bozeman. Sheriff what? Stay there. What happened? Ms. Whitmore, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not do the thing I know you're about to do. Ammons was breathing hard. At 9:40 this morning, 4 minutes after I got that lab result back, my office received a phone call from a federal number I have never seen in 31 years of doing this job, and a man who did not give me a name told me that my department was to stand down on any and all activity on Redmond Ridge pending, and I quote, jurisdictional review. That's not a real thing. I know it's not a real thing, Ammon snapped. I've been a cop since 1987. I know what a real thing sounds like. That's what I'm telling you. Sheriff, there's more. He stopped. She heard him swallow. Marjorie Pike didn't come back from lunch. Claire's whole body went cold. Say that slower. The land office clerk, Marjorie, 64 years old, 38 years in that building, never missed a day, walks to the diner at 11:30 every single morning of her life. Ammon's voice was shaking now, and he was not a man whose voice shook. Her purse is on her desk, her car's in the lot, her ledger's open on the table to the 1961 page. The 1961 page. The page she showed you, Ammon said. Claire straightened up very slowly. Sheriff, she said, is the ledger still there? A pause. Is the ledger still there, Sheriff? No, Ammon said. The book's open. The page is gone. At 11:31 in the morning in a law office in Bozeman, Montana, Claire Whitmore hung up a telephone and stood absolutely still for 4 seconds. And Richard Hawthorne watched a thing happen in her face that he had seen exactly 3 times in 51 years and had prayed he would never see again. It wasn't rage. It was the total absence of it. Ms. Whitmore, he said carefully. She picked up her keys. Claire, they took a 64-year-old woman, Claire said, who showed me a book. Claire, listen to me. This is what he wants. He wants you angry. He wants you moving. He has been building this for 9. I'm not angry. Lieutenant, I'm not angry, Colonel. She said it perfectly evenly, and that was the worst part. That was the part he'd think about later in the hospital at 3 in the morning. Angry is what I was in your parking garage. Angry's done. Angry took 11 minutes, and I don't have another 11 minutes because Marjorie Pike has a cat and a bad hip and a birthday in October. And she is sitting in a room somewhere right now trying to be brave. And every minute I spend feeling something is a minute she spends alone. She was at the door. They'll kill you, Hawthorne said. Claire stopped. She looked back at him, and for 1 second, one single second, something almost like a smile went across her face, and it was the most frightening thing he had ever seen in his life. Colonel, she said, you got 411 pages on me. What's on page 190? He didn't answer. You said my mother called me that night. You said you know what I told her. Claire's hand was on the door. You've read it 9 times, so say it. Hawthorne's mouth moved. It says you cashed it twice, he whispered. Yes, sir, Claire said. And Colonel, both times they came to me. Then she was gone and the door closed very softly behind her, and the old man sat alone in his office and understood 51 years too late exactly what he had done. She was doing 90 on 191 by 11:47. At 12:15, she called Duarte, and he picked up on half a ring. Wes, I need you to say no to me. What? I'm going to ask you for something, Claire said, and I need you to say no because if you say yes, it ends your career and probably your freedom. And I'm not Wes. I'm not going to be able to talk myself out of asking. So I need you to just say no right now before I say it. Please. There was a very long silence on the phone. Then Wesley Duarte said, Reyes. Claire's hands tightened on the wheel. Don't. Reyes asked you for something once, Duarte said. In the stairwell. You remember what you told him? Wes, don't. You said I've got you. You said it while you were bleeding Claire. And you had him. You had him the whole one down. He died anyway, Claire said. Yeah, Duarte said. He did. But he didn't die alone, and there's exactly one person on this earth who made sure of that, and she's about to drive into a mountain by herself at 90 miles an hour. Claire couldn't speak. So no, Duarte said. That's my answer. No, I won't say no. Ask me. Wes, ask me Whit. And Claire Whitmore going 90 miles an hour toward a mountain that a government had forgotten and an old man had guarded and a dead Marine was standing on, opened her mouth and heard herself say it. I need 4 people, she said, and I need them in Montana by dark. At 12:31, Wesley Duarte called her back with 4 names and Claire pulled over on the shoulder of a state highway to write them on the back of a gas receipt with a pencil that kept breaking. Okay, he said, ready, go. Marcus Bell, 19 years EOD, retired out of Eglin in 2023. He's in Coeur d'Alene and he can be there by 9, so he'll come. Whit, I said your name and he stopped talking for 11 seconds. He'll come. Next. Priya Nandakumar, 18 Delta. She was on the bird at Kunar. Claire's pencil stopped. She was on the bird at Kunar, Duarte repeated quieter. I know who was on the bird at Kunar West. Then you know she'll come. Claire looked at the pencil in her hand. Does she know it's me? She asked if it was you, Duarte said. I said yes. She said, tell her I've been waiting 2 years for the phone to ring. Claire closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she said next. Ray Kowalski, recon, 61 years old, bad knee, worse attitude, forgot more about ground in this country than you and I will ever learn. He's 4 hours out and he's already driving, which I want on the record because I hadn't finished the sentence. And 4. Me, Duarte said. I'm 4. Wes, don't. You've got a daughter. Yeah, he said. She's 8. And someday she's gonna ask me what I did when my friend called at 5 in the morning and I've got 2 answers available and only one of them is survivable. A pause. Wheels up in 40. Tell me what I'm walking into. I don't know yet. Whit, I don't know, Wes, and I'm not going to lie to you at the front end. That's the only promise I've got. She started the truck. But I'll tell you what I know at the gate and all of it, and then anybody who wants to leave can leave and nobody says a word about it. Ever. Nobody's leaving, Duarte said. You don't know that yet. I've known that since 5 in the morning, he said and hung up. At 1:52, she walked into the land office in Redmond, and Sheriff Ammons was standing over Marjorie Pike's desk with his hat in his hand like a man at a viewing. I told you to stay in Bozeman. You did? And you drove 140 miles in 91 minutes. 103, Claire said. Where's the purse? Evidence. Show me the desk. Whitmore. Or, Sheriff. She turned and looked at him. You called me. Out of every human being on this earth, you could have called at 11:24 in the morning. You picked up a phone and called a woman you met 3 days ago who you thought was crazy, and you did it because at 9:40 this morning, a federal number that doesn't exist told you to stop, and some part of you that's been a cop since 1987 said no. She held his eyes. You already made your decision. You made it before you dialed. So let's not spend the afternoon pretending. Ammons's jaw worked. Then he stepped aside. At 1:56, Claire crouched at the desk and did not touch anything and looked for 90 seconds, and then she said, she wasn't taken. Ammons's head came up. What? Look at the chair. It's a chair. It's pushed in, Claire said. Sheriff, when somebody grabs you off a chair, the chair goes back. It goes over. It goes into the wall behind it. Marjorie Pike stood up and pushed her chair in because she's been pushing that chair in for 38 years. Because it's the last thing she does before she walks to the diner. And a person doesn't do a 38-year habit while a man's got a hand on her. Bowers said from the doorway, maybe she just went to lunch. Her purse is here, so she forgot it, Deputy Claire said without turning around. There's a pen on this desk. It's uncapped, and the cap's 4 inches to the right, and the ledger's open, and the page is torn out at the gutter clean with 2 hands not ripped. She stood up. She was writing when somebody came in. She capped nothing. She stood. She pushed in her chair, and somebody tore the page out for her, or she tore it out herself and handed it over. And then she walked out of this building on her own feet, leaving a purse she's carried since the Clinton administration. Why would she do that? Ammons said. Claire looked at him. Because whoever came through that door said something to her. She said that mattered more than her purse. Nobody said anything. Sheriff, does Marjorie have kids? 2 boys. Both in Billings, grown. Call them. Already did. Nothing. Call them again, Claire said, and don't ask if they've heard from her. Ask if anybody's asked about them. Ammons stared at her for a beat. Then he went for his phone. At 2:14, he came back with his face wrong. Miss Whitmore. Say it. Her youngest, Ammons said. Cody. He's 26. He drives a route for a beer distributor. He says a man came to his apartment in Billings at 7 o'clock this morning and knocked on his door and told him his truck had a taillight out. Claire went very still. That's all? That's all, Ammons said. Polite, friendly, never came in. Cody said the guy even pointed at it, said it took 10 seconds. Was the taillight out? Ammons swallowed. No, he said. Claire put both hands on Marjorie Pike's desk and lowered her head. That's the message, she said. That's the whole message. He didn't threaten her. He didn't have to. He stood in her office at 11:30 in the morning and said a sentence with her son's address in it, and a 64-year-old woman with a bad hip pushed in her chair, and walked out of this building to protect a boy in Billings who doesn't even know it happened. Jesus, Bauer said. That's not a kidnapping, Claire said. That's a man who knows exactly how much a mother is worth and charged her every cent of it. At 2:20, she walked out and Ammons followed her into the parking lot. Whitmore, stop, stop. He got in front of her. I've got a stand-down order from a number I can't trace, a missing clerk I can't report, in a sheriff's department of 11 people, 6 of whom I trust, with a parking ticket. Tell me what you're doing. You don't want that answer? Try me. Sheriff, if I tell you what I'm doing, you're either an accessory or you're the guy who has to stop me, Claire said. Right now, you're neither, and neither is the only useful thing you can be. That's a hell of a thing to say to a man's face. It's the kindest thing I've got. Ammons's mouth went tight. 4 men are dead in this county in 9 years. Claire stopped walking. What? Since 2017, he said it fast like he'd been holding it in his mouth all day. 4 hunters, all of them within 6 miles of your north face. 2 exposure, 1 heart, 1 fell, and all of them cleared, all of them signed off by the state, and all of them fine. All of them fine. Miss Whitmore and I have signed 4 pieces of paper in 9 years that I have never once believed. Why didn't you say that 3 days ago? Because 3 days ago, Ammons said you were a crazy woman with a fence. And Claire Whitmore, standing in a gravel lot at 2:23 in the afternoon, laughed once without any humor in it at all. Well, she said, welcome to the crazy. They came in after dark, one at a time, on 4 different roads, which Claire had asked for, and none of them had questioned. Ray Kowalski got there first at 8:41, 61 years old, and moving like a hinge that needed oil. And he walked straight past Claire, put his hands on her porch rail, looked out at the black shape of the ridge for 11 full seconds and said, well, that's a rotten piece of ground. Ray, that's a rotten piece of ground, Whitmore, who cleared the north face, 1961. Huh, Kowalski said. They knew what they were doing. He turned around and looked at her. Hi, kid. Claire's throat closed. Hi, Ray. You look like hell. I know. Good, he said. Means you've been thinking. Marcus Bell came at 9:04, 6'4", and quiet as a rumor, and he didn't say hello. He walked into her kitchen, set a black case on her table, opened it, and said, tell me about the door. What door? Whit Duarte said 50-year-old federal installation north face sealed. That's a door. Bell finally looked up. Somebody welded, poured, or bolted a hole in a mountain in 1976, and somebody's been picking at it for 9 years. And I need to know which, because if it's poured, we've got a week, and if it's bolted, we've got about 4 hours. Claire hesitated. Colonel Hawthorne said the seals were cut in 1979. Marcus Bell's hand stopped moving. Cut, he said. Cut. Then it's not sealed, Whit, Bell said. It's closed. That's a different word. Somebody's been able to walk into that mountain for 47 years and just chose not to. Priya Nandakumar arrived at 9:20, and she didn't say anything at all. She came through the door, and she looked at Claire, and Claire looked at her, and the whole room went quiet, and neither of them moved. Priya, don't. I should have. Whitmore, if you apologize to me right now, Priya said. I will get back in my car. Claire shut her mouth. 2 years, Priya said. 2 years I sat in Bethesda putting other people back together and waiting for one phone call from the only person on that bird who walked away, and it never came. And you know what I decided? I decided you were dead too. That's what I did with it. I put you in the ground with the rest of them because that was easier than the truth, which is that you were alive somewhere and you just didn't call. The clock over the stove ticked. So no, Priya said, and her voice finally cracked. You don't get to apologize. You get to tell me what we're doing. That's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted from you. Give me a job, Claire. Claire's eyes were burning. I've got a 64-year-old woman with a bad hip out there somewhere, she said. Priya wiped her face with the back of her wrist. There it is, she said. Okay, now we're talking. Duarte came last at 9:52, and he stood in her doorway with a duffel on his shoulder and looked at the four of them in her kitchen and said, "Well, hell, it's Tuesday." "It's Thursday, Wes." "Feels like Tuesday," Duarte said. And that was it. That was the whole reunion. 5 people in a kitchen in Montana with the lights off and the blinds down, and Claire Whitmore stood at the head of her own table at 9:58 at night and told them every single thing, start to finish, exactly as she'd promised. She told them about the elk, about the fence, about 22 blank years and a stamp with no purpose code, about an Army detachment that had never existed within 200 miles of anything, about a phone number that stopped answering in 1976 and a 23-year-old lieutenant who kept calling it for 6 weeks, about 4 men who went in and 2 who came out, about a sergeant in a garage in Wichita, about Sir, they left it running, about Victor Kane and $2.4 million and a man who knew what she'd paid. And then she told them about a cigarette under a rock and a dead Marine's DNA and a father who'd been getting a photograph every June 11th for 9 years. When she finished, it was 10:31, and nobody in that kitchen had moved in 33 minutes. Ray Kowalski broke it. "Okay," he said, "so the kid's on the flank." "Yes. He's been on the flank 6 weeks. At least. And he ain't touched you." "No," Kowalski nodded slowly. "Then he ain't Kane's." Rady Bell started. "He ain't Kane's," Kowalski said again louder. "Marcus, I ran that flank for 30 years. You don't put a man on the outside corner unless you trust him with the whole element's life, and you don't put a man there for 6 weeks in a row unless he asks for it, and there's exactly one reason a man asks for the corner." He looked around the table. "Because it's the only spot where nobody's watching him." The room went dead silent. "He picked the one position on that hill," Kowalski said, "where he could look at your house every night by himself." Claire's chest hurt. "He's not surveilling me," she said quietly. "No, kid," Kowalski said. "He's watching you. There's a difference and you know it." Priya said, "Why?" And Claire heard herself say before she'd thought it through, "Because I bought his father's mountain." At 10:44, Marcus Bell said the thing nobody wanted said, "Whit, what's the mission?" "Get Marjorie back." "And that's it." "That's not it," Bell said. "That's the part you can say out loud." "What's the mission?" Claire put her hands flat on the table. "Marcus, there is something under my house that a government forgot about 50 years ago," she said. 11 men died keeping it quiet. 4 hunters died within 6 miles of it in 9 years. A man who does not exist has been digging at it for 9 years, and the day he gets in, he owns a thing that nobody on this planet can admit is real, which means nobody on this planet can take it back. So the mission is he doesn't get in. The mission is he doesn't get in. And after, there's no after, Claire said. "Marcus, look at me. There's no after. Whatever's in there, we can't hand it to anybody because the last people who had it forgot they had it. There is no phone number. That's the whole point. There's nobody to call." Duarte said very quietly, "Then what do we do with it?" Claire didn't answer. Bell did. "We bury it," he said. "That's what she's saying. She's saying we put 1,100 feet of mountain back on top of it and we never tell a soul, and every one of us walks out of here carrying it for the rest of our lives exactly like the old man did." Nobody argued. That was the part Claire would remember later. Not that they agreed, that nobody argued. At 11:20, she went out alone. She told him she was checking a camera, and Duarte looked at her for a long second and said nothing, and she loved him for it, and she went out the back and up the draw, and she took no weapon again because a weapon was a sentence, and she wasn't going out there to say that sentence. She went to the North Cut. She went to the Rock. And at 11:58, Claire Whitmore sat down in the open on a 50-year-old Fields of Fire cut with her hands on her knees, and she said out loud to the dark, "I know you're there." Nothing. "I know you're there," she said, "because you're a smoker, and it's been 6 hours, and there's a rock about 11 meters left of me that you've been putting them under since May." Nothing. "I found the ledger page," Claire said. 1961, Court of Engineers, Detachment 7. She waited. "That's the page you took out of Marjorie's book this morning, isn't it?" The dark said nothing. "You didn't take it for Kane," Claire said. "If you took it for Kane, Kane would have had it in 2019. You took it so Kane wouldn't have it. You've been taking things off this mountain for 6 weeks." Nothing. 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 Then from about 40 meters out and 11 degrees left of where she'd have bet her life he was Where's my father's page from 1976? Claire didn't move. There isn't one, she said. There has to be. There isn't, Daniel. She heard him then, not a lot, just enough that he wanted her to. Don't call me that. Why not? Because that man's dead, he said, and I put him there myself. At 12:06, Sergeant Daniel Hawthorne stood 11 meters away from her in the dark, and Claire Whitmore never once turned her head to look at him because she understood absolutely that if she looked, he would leave. Your father buried you, she said. I know. He took the flag. I know. He hasn't spoken your name in 15 years without stopping to breathe first. I know. It came out of him like something torn. Then quiet erect. You think I don't know? Then why? Because I went into a valley in Helmand in June of 2011, Danny said. And I came out, and there was a man in a tent who told me I had a choice. He said, you can go home, Sergeant, and you can be a man who was in a valley. Or you can be nobody, and you can do the work. And I was 23 years old, ma'am, and I had a father who ran a gate in the wilderness for 3 years after his country forgot he was there, and I thought I was doing the same thing he did. Claire's hands were shaking. Who was in the tent? You know who. Say it. Victor Kane, Danny said. At 12:11, the whole world tilted. Kane didn't fake your death, Claire said slowly. No, you did. I signed it, Danny said. There was a form. That's the funny part. That's the part that'll kill you. There was a form. I signed a piece of paper in a tent in Afghanistan that made me dead, and 11 days later, 2 Marines knocked on my father's door and told him the truth, because to them, it was the truth, and I have thought about those 2 boys every day for 15 years. They weren't lying. They didn't know. Nobody knew. That's how it works. That's the whole trick. His voice went flat. You don't need a conspiracy, ma'am. You just need a form and a phone number, and then someday the phone stops ringing, and there you are. And then it stopped ringing, Claire whispered. Silence. When 2017, Danny said, and you went to Kane. There was no Kane, Danny said. That's what I'm telling you. I called and it rang. I called for 6 weeks and it rang and rang and rang. He laughed, and it was the worst sound Claire had ever heard a human being make. You want to know the joke? You want the actual joke? I didn't even understand it until I was 35 years old, and I was standing outside a mountain in Montana. My father called a number for 6 weeks in 1976. I called a number for 6 weeks in 2017. Same country, same silence, 41 years apart. It's not a program, ma'am. It's a machine. It's been running the whole time and nobody's driving it, and it eats people like us because we're the only ones who will stand at the door. Claire couldn't breathe. Then who's Kane now? A man with the phone, Danny said. What? He kept it, Danny said. That's it. That's the whole thing. Everybody else went home and Victor Kane kept the phone, and now when it rings, it's him. He calls sheriffs. He calls labs. He calls state offices at 9:40 in the morning and says jurisdictional review, and 31-year cops stand down because the number's real, ma'am. That's what nobody gets. The number is real. It's just that there's nobody on the other end of it anymore, except a man who never went home. At 12:19, Claire said, why haven't you touched me? The dark was quiet a long time. Because you rebuilt the fence, Danny said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. His voice was raw. He gave you 11 days, and I watched you take 4 spools of wire off a truck by yourself and put that fence back up in 1 day, and I sat right here, and I watched you do it, and I sat right here, he stopped. Ma'am, I'm 38 years old, and I have not stood on the right side of a fence since I was 23. And I watched a woman who had every reason to run put a fence back up alone in the dark, and I couldn't. He stopped again. Say it, Claire said. I couldn't remember the last time I saw somebody do something for free, Danny said. And Claire Whitmore, sitting in the open on a fields of fire cut at 20 past midnight, put her face in her hands. At 12:24, she said, Marjorie Pike. She's safe. Claire's head came up. Say that again. She's in a fishing cabin on Boulder Creek with $200 and a phone with no battery and a note in my handwriting that says, stay till Sunday. Danny said, she's got a bad hip and she made me carry her groceries. She called me a nice young man. His voice broke completely. Ma'am, she called me a nice young man. You took her. I took her first, Danny said. Kane sent a man to Billings this morning to knock on her son's door about a taillight, and I had about 40 minutes, and I did the only thing I could think of, which was to get to that office before his people did and tell her a sentence with her boy's name in it and walk her out the back on her own feet, and I have been sick about it since 11:31 this morning. Claire was on her feet. You have to bring her in. I can't. Danny. I can't, he said. The second she surfaces, he knows I moved her. Right now, he thinks she's his. Right now, he's got a hostage he doesn't have, and that is the only thing on this mountain that is working in our favor. And if I give it up, we lose the pill. You said our, Claire said. Dead silence. You said our favor. Nothing. Sergeant. Don't, Danny said, and it came out ragged. Your father is dying, Claire said. 11 months. He told me today in his office with his hands shaking so bad he couldn't hold a pitcher of water. And he has a photograph of you in his desk with a man's face cut out of it, and he has watched 20 seconds of you laughing 4,000 times. And if you don't come off this mountain, and Daniel, he is going to go into the ground believing that the last thing he ever did to you was let you go. The dark made a sound. He knows I'm alive. Since 2017. That's not, his voice cracked wide open. Ma'am, that's not he knows. He's known for 9 years. Kane's been mailing him a photograph every June 11th. Every June 11th. Yes. And Sergeant Daniel Hawthorne, 38 years old, standing in the dark on the mountain, his father had guarded for a country that forgot them both, made a noise that Claire would hear in her sleep for the rest of her life. That's the day I died, he said. At 12:31, he stepped out where she could see him. She turned her head finally and looked at him, and he looked like his father, and he looked like nothing at all, and he was crying, and he didn't wipe his face, and he didn't apologize for it. What do you want? He said. The door. Whitmore. You've been inside, Claire said. Danny didn't answer. You've been inside, she said again. That's why you're on the corner. You go in on your rotation and you come out and you smoke a cigarette and you hide it under a rock like a man who doesn't want anybody to know his hands are shaking. How many times? Once, he said, when in March. What's in there? Danny Hawthorne looked at her for a very long moment. Ma'am, he said, in 1979, my father's men cut the seals and 4 went in and 2 came out. I know. Do you know why 2 came out? Claire's whole body went cold. Because 2 stayed, Danny said. They're still in there. They're still sitting at the console. Somebody, his voice failed. He got it back. Somebody put them there and closed the door, and it's not a tomb, Miss Whitmore. It's warm. There's power. There's been power in that mountain since 1961, and nobody has paid a bill, and nobody has turned a key, and it is still running, and Kane doesn't want what's in there. Then what does he want? He wants what it's been doing, Danny said, for 65 years with nobody watching. And then his head turned fast, and he went absolutely rigid. Get up, he said. Danny, get up. He was already moving. That's a diesel on the county road at 12:34 in the morning, and there's no reason on God's earth for a diesel on the county road at 12:34 in the morning. Claire was up. How many? Ma'am, listen. How many, Sergeant? Danny Hawthorne stopped and looked back at her, and his face did something she'd never forget. He gave you 10 days, he said. He lied. They ran the draw down together, and Claire keyed her phone twice on the way, and Duarte picked up before the second buzz stopped. Wes, diesel on the county road southbound, 1 vehicle, maybe 2. How do you know? Because I'm standing next to a man who counted it. There was a beat of absolute silence on the line. Whit, Duarte said carefully, who are you standing next to? Wake everybody up, Claire said. Lights stay off, Ray on the porch, Marcus at the north window, Priya in the back bedroom with her bag open. Nobody points anything at anybody until I'm inside the door. Claire, Wes, nobody points anything at anybody. Say it back. Nobody points anything, Duarte said, at anybody. At 12:39, she came through her own back door with Sergeant Daniel Hawthorne. 11 inches behind her and 4 human beings in her kitchen, went from asleep to something else in less than a second. And Ray Kowalski, 61 years old with a bad knee, was somehow already standing when the door opened. Nobody said a word. Marcus Bell looked at the man behind her. Then he looked at Claire. Whit, Bell said quietly, that's a rifle he's got. I know. That's a good rifle. I know, Marcus. He's got a plate carrier on. Marcus, I'm just saying what I see, Bell said, and he did not move his hands, and he did not move his eyes. Priya came out of the hallway with her bag half zipped and stopped dead. Whitmore, she said. Who is that? Claire turned and put her back against her own kitchen counter so she could see all 6 of them at once, and she said the sentence she'd been assembling in her head for the whole 11 minutes down the draw. This is Sergeant Daniel Hawthorne, United States Marine Corps, she said. He's the DNA on the cigarette. He's the man on the flank. He's been on this mountain for 6 weeks, and he has had every opportunity in the world to kill me, and he hasn't. And about 9 minutes ago, he told me a thing that saved all our lives. So before anybody says anything else, everybody in this kitchen is going to take one breath. Nobody took a breath. He's dead, Duarte said flatly. Yes. Whit, I read the casualty report this morning with my own eyes. Hellman, June 11th. He signed it, Claire said. Duarte's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He signed his own casualty report in a tent in 2011 because a man told him it was the work, Claire said. And then in 2017, the phone stopped ringing, and he's been standing outside a door ever since, exactly like his father did in 1976. And if that sounds insane to you, good it should, because it is insane, and it's also the only true thing anybody's said in this county in 50 years. Ray Kowalski hadn't taken his eyes off Danny once. Son, he said. Danny's jaw tightened. Sir. Who was on your left at Sangan? The room went taut like a wire. Corporal Ostrowski, Danny said. He was left. Tunney was right. Tunney's from Erie, and he never shut up about the Steelers, and he had a picture of a dog in his helmet band that wasn't even his dog. It was his sister's dog, and he called it his dog anyway. His voice never wavered, but something in his throat did. Ostrowski's got a wife named Danielle. She's not named after me. He liked to say she was. Kowalski nodded slowly. Okay, he said. That's it, Bell said. Ray, that's it. Marcus, you can fake a document, Kowalski said. You can't fake the dog. He finally sat down, which cost him, and Claire watched it cost him. That's a man who was there. At 12:44, Marcus Bell said, fine. He was there. He's still not ours. I'm not asking to be yours, Danny said. Then what are you asking? I'm not asking for anything, Danny said. I came down the hill to tell you there's 22 minutes on that diesel, and then it's going to matter a whole lot less what any of you think about me. 22, Duarte said. Give or take. How many men? Danny hesitated. Sergeant, Claire said. How many men? 19, Danny said. The number landed in that kitchen like something dropped from a roof. 19, Priya repeated. Yes, ma'am. There's 5 of us. 6, Danny said. Nobody said anything. 6, he said again, quieter, and he didn't look at any of them when he said it. At 12:46, Claire said, Marcus, talk to me about the door. We've got 19 men. Marcus, look at me. She got in front of him. 19 men is a problem. The door is the problem. 19 men don't matter if the door doesn't open. Talk to me about the door. Bell exhaled hard through his nose. Fine, he said. Sergeant, the north face. What's on it? Blast door 2 stage, Danny said immediately. Outer's a 54-inch steel plug on a rail hydraulic dead since God knows. Inner's a personnel hatch with a mechanical wheel. Cut in 79. The seals were, not the door. What's holding it now? Nothing, Danny said. Bell's head came up. Say that again. Nothing's holding it, Danny said. The wheel turns. It's turned since 1979. That's the part I couldn't... He stopped. That's the part I couldn't sleep about. There's no lock. There never was a lock. There was a rule. That's all that was ever on that mountain. 12 Marines and a rule, and then 11 men who died keeping it in 47 years of nobody. And the whole entire time, the door was just unlocked. You could walk in. Anybody could walk in. Nobody did. Then why's Kane been digging for 9 years? Duarte said. And Danny looked at him. Because he didn't know that, he said. Silence. He's been surveying the ground above it since 2017. Because he assumed it was sealed, Danny said. Everybody assumed. My father assumed. 11 men died, and every one of them died assuming. And Kane's been running radar over 1,100 feet of granite for 9 years, looking for a soft spot in a wall that has a door in it. Priya said very quietly. You're telling me nobody ever tried the handle? Ma'am, I tried it in March, Danny said. First time in 47 years. It opened like a garage. At 12:49, Ray Kowalski laughed once the ugliest sound in the room. 50 years, he said. 50 years and the whole thing was held shut by a bunch of guys deciding not to. Yes, sir, Danny said. And the second one guy decided different. Yes, sir. It was over. Yes, sir, Danny said. That's what my father's been guarding. He didn't guard a door. He guarded the decision. Nobody spoke for a moment. Okay, oh, Bell said, and his voice had changed completely. Okay, then I need to know what's inside right now, and I need it in engineering terms, and I need it in 90 seconds, because if there's power in there, I can't put a shaped charge anywhere near it until I know what it's powering. I don't know what it's powering. Sergeant, I don't know, Danny said. I got 11 meters past the hatch, and there's a corridor, and there's light. Not emergency light. Light, fixtures, warm. And there's a hum, and it's not a generator. I know what a generator sounds like. My whole life is generators. It's steady. It doesn't cycle. It doesn't load and unload. It's been making that exact same noise since before my father was born, and I stood in it for 4 minutes and 40 seconds, and then I ran. And I want to be very clear with all of you about that, because you're going to have to trust me tonight. I ran. I'm not brave. I got 11 meters into that mountain, and I turned around and I ran out and I threw up behind a rock, and then I smoked a cigarette and I hit it, and I have been sitting on that flank for 4 months trying to make myself go back in. The kitchen was dead quiet. Why'd you run? Priya asked. Danny didn't answer. Sergeant, Claire said. Why'd you run? Because somebody said my name, he said. At 12:51, nobody in that room breathed. That's not possible, Bell said. No, sir. That's not Sergeant. That's 47 years. There's no... I know what's possible, Danny said, and his voice finally cracked open. I stood in a corridor 11 meters inside a mountain that my father guarded for 8 years, and a man said Hawthorne, and I ran like a child, and I have not told another human being that until this exact second, and I'm telling 6 strangers in a kitchen, because in about 11 minutes we're all going to be dead anyway, and I would rather not die as the only person who knows. Claire's whole body had gone cold. 2 men stayed in 1979, she said. Yes, ma'am. Danny, look at me. 2 men went in 1979 and stayed, and 47 years later, somebody said the name Hawthorne. Yes, ma'am. Your father's name. Yes, ma'am. Those men knew your father. Danny Hawthorne closed his eyes. Yes, ma'am, he said. They served under him. At 12:53, Marcus Bell sat down slowly in a kitchen chair and put both hands flat on the table like a man steadying a boat. That's not people, he said. Wit, whatever that is, that's not people, not after 47 years. That's a recording, that's a system that heard a Marine walk in and pulled a name out of a 50-year-old roster. That's what it is, Danny said. That's exactly what it is. That's what I told myself for 4 months. That's what I've been sitting on that rock telling myself every single night. He was shaking now. But it didn't say Sergeant Hawthorne, sir, and it didn't say Colonel Hawthorne. What did it say? It said Danny, he whispered. The refrigerator hummed. Nobody in that mountain, Danny said, has ever met me. At 12:55, the diesel came off the county road onto Claire's private cut, and everything changed. Ray Kowalski's head turned first. That's him. 2 vehicles, Duarte said from the window. No, 3. 19 men, Priya said. 19 was an hour ago, Danny said. Claire put both hands on her kitchen table and looked down at the wood and made herself breathe once, all the way in, all the way out. And when she looked up, her voice was the flattest thing in that house. Wes, she said, how far to the north face from here? 2 miles. Uphill 1,100 feet of it. Marcus, how long do you need at that hatch? Bell looked at her. To do what he said, to make it so nobody ever opens it again. Whit, how long, Marcus? With what I brought, Bell rubbed his face. That's not a door problem. That's a tunnel problem. I don't blow the door. You blow a door and you make a hole with a lid on it. You drop the roof. 11 meters in, you bring the overburden down and you turn a corridor into a hill. And Whit, if there's power in there, I might be putting a charge into a wall, and with 65 years of God knows what on the other side of how long? 40 minutes, Bell said. 40 minutes if nobody's shooting at me. Somebody's going to be shooting at you. Then 90. You don't have 90, Danny said. Then I don't have it, Belle snapped. You want the truth, ma'am? The truth is, I need 4 hours in a drill rig and a permit from a government that doesn't remember this place exists. And what I've got is a duffel bag and a Marine who's been dead since 2011. So somebody tell me what we're actually doing here, because I'm not going to stand in a kitchen and pretend. Nobody answered. Claire did. We're going to give him the mountain, she said. 5 heads turned. At 12:58, Claire Whitmore said, Wes, get the map. Whit, get the map. He got the map. She flattened it on the table with the heel of her hand, and she didn't look at any of them. And she talked fast, and it was the first time in 2 years and 11 days that she had heard her own voice do that. Kane's coming up my cut with 19 men because he thinks he's evicting a woman, she said. That's the entire premise of tonight. That's what he paid for. He offered me $2.4 million, and I didn't take it, and he doesn't think I said no. He thinks I hesitated because in his whole life, nobody has ever said no to that number without hesitating first. He gave me 11 days and then 10, and then he came at 1 in the morning and on day 4 because he wants me scared, not dead. He wants me signing. He's going to be disappointed, Priya said. No, Claire said. He's going to be right. That's the plan. He's going to be right about everything. Duarte's head came up. Whit. He wants to find a frightened woman in a cabin, Claire said. So he's going to find a frightened woman in a cabin. Absolutely not, Duarte said. Wes. No, Claire, I flew here. He's got 19 men and we've got 6 and the door's 2 miles uphill, Claire said. Wes, do the math. Do it out loud. There's exactly 1 asset on this mountain tonight that's worth 19 men, and it isn't the door because he doesn't know the door opens. It's me. He needs a signature. He spent 9 years learning that you can't take this land. You have to be given it because a taking creates a record, and a record creates a question. That's why he didn't kill me in May. That's why he didn't kill me last Tuesday when he sat outside my back door, idling for 11 minutes. The room went silent. He's not coming here to end it, Claire said. He's coming here to close it. And a man who's coming to close a deal and will spend an hour talking, and every minute he spends talking to me in my kitchen is a minute Marcus Bell is standing at a hatch 2 miles uphill with nobody looking at him. At 100, Marcus Bell said very softly, 90 minutes. Yes. You're going to buy me 90 minutes with your mouth. Yes. What if he figures it out? He won't. If he figures it out, Marcus, Claire said, he's going to figure it out. Bell stared at her. He's going to figure it out somewhere around minute 60, she said. Because he's not stupid. He's the opposite of stupid, and the second he counts my chairs, he's going to know 6 people ate at this table tonight. So I don't need him to not figure it out. I need him to figure it out late. Ray Kowalski started laughing. Ray, Duarte said. No, she's right, Kowalski said. God help us, she's right. Wes, that's the oldest trick in the book, and it works every single time because it costs the one thing nobody's willing to spend. He looked at Claire and his eyes were wet and furious. Kid, you're going to sit in a chair. Yes. You're going to sit in a chair in a room with 19 men and no way out, and you're going to talk. Yes, Ray. That's not a plan. That's a hostage. It's a timer, Claire said. At 1:02, Priya Nandakumar said, I'll stay with her. No, Claire said. Whitmore, Priya, no. You listen to me. Priya came around that table and got in her face, and she was 5'2", and Claire had watched her carry a 190-pound man 40 meters with a shattered wrist. You listen to me right now. 2 years ago, you walked away from a bird, and you decided the only way anybody survives being near you is if you're alone, and you have been running that play ever since. And it is not a strategy, Claire, it's a symptom. And I did not drive 9 hours to watch you do it one more time. Claire's throat closed. If you sit in that chair alone, Priya said, and it goes wrong, then every single person in this room spends the rest of their life exactly the way Richard Hawthorne spent his. So no, you don't get to do that to us. Not again. Nobody breathed. Priya, Claire said, and her voice was almost nothing. I need you at the hatch. Marcus doesn't need a medic to blow a... Marcus is going to need a medic, Claire said. Priya stopped. Because there are 19 men on this mountain, Claire said. And in about 40 minutes, some of them are going to be standing between him and that door. And I need him to get there, and I need him to still be breathing when he does. Priya, look at me. I'm not sending you away. I'm sending you to the part that matters. Her voice finally broke. You want to know why I didn't call for 2 years? Because every time I picked up that phone, I saw your face in that bird. That's it. That's the whole reason. That's the entire 2 years. I am not a strong person. Priya, I'm a coward with good hands, and the only thing I have ever been able to do is stand where the shooting is so nobody else has to, and I'm asking you to let me do the one thing I'm actually good at. The kitchen was absolutely still. Priya Nandakumar wiped her face with the back of her wrist. Say, I've got you, she said. Claire's eyes closed. Say it, Whitmore. I've got you, Claire said. Damn right, Priya said and picked up her bag. At 1:05, Danny Hawthorne said, I'll take them up. You're not going up, Claire said. Ma'am, you're staying here. Ma'am. Sergeant, in about 6 minutes, Victor Kane is going to walk into this house, Claire said. And there is exactly one way this works, and it's that he believes what he sees. He's got a man on my flank he trusts. He's had that man for 9 years. And when he comes up back cut, he's going to key a radio and ask the coroner if anything moved tonight. Danny went rigid. And you're going to answer him, Claire said. No, I don't know. You're going to answer him and you're going to say the ground's clear. Ms. Whitmore, I can't. You can. You don't understand what you're asking, Danny said, and he was coming apart now, right there in her kitchen. He knows me. He's known me since I was 23 years old. He's the only person on this earth who said my name out loud in 15 years, ma'am. He was the man in the tent. He made me. He's the last thing I've got, and he's the worst thing that ever happened to me, and those are the same sentence. I know. You don't, Danny. Claire took him by the plate carrier with both hands, which nobody in that room expected, least of all him. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to lie to the only person who ever came looking for you. And I'm telling you that your father did the same thing for 8 years, standing outside a door for a country that forgot him, and it cost him everything, and he did it anyway, and he is dying in Bozeman right now, still doing it. That's not fair. No, Claire said. It isn't. Danny Hawthorne stood in that kitchen and shook. What do I say? He whispered. You say the ground's clear. And then what? And then you go up that hill, Claire said, and you open the door for Marcus Bell because you're the only human being alive who knows where it is. At 1:08, the radio on Danny's chest clicked twice. Everyone froze. It clicked twice again. That's him, Danny said. Answer it. Whitmore. Answer it, Sergeant. Danny Hawthorne closed his eyes and keyed the mic, and when he spoke, his voice came out perfectly level and perfectly bored, and it was the single most frightening thing Claire had ever heard, because she understood in that second exactly how good he was and exactly how long he'd been doing it. Coroner, he said. The speaker crackled, and Victor Kane's voice came into Claire Whitmore's kitchen. Talk to me. Ground's clear. House. One light in the back, Danny said. Went off at 11:40. She's been in and out twice since Tuesday, both times to the fence line. Nobody up the county road. Nobody on the ridge. A pause. You're sure, Kane said. I've been on this rock for 6 weeks, Danny said. Yeah, I'm sure. Another pause. Longer. Danny. Every person in that kitchen stopped existing. Yeah. You all right, kid? And Sergeant Daniel Hawthorne stood in a stranger's kitchen with his father's name in his mouth and 6 people watching him and said, I'm Cole Vic. Kane laughed. Almost done, he said. Almost done, kid. Go warm up after. Kane out. The radio clicked off. Nobody moved for 4 seconds. Then Danny turned around and put his hand over his mouth and did not make a sound. And Ray Kowalski, 61 years old with a bad knee, got up out of his chair and crossed that kitchen and put a hand on the back of a dead man's neck and said, son, 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 breathe. At 1:10, Claire said, go, all of you. Now. Duarte didn't move. Wes, I'm not leaving you in this house. Wes. Claire, I flew across the country in 7 hours because you called me at 5 in the morning for the first time in 2 years, Duarte said. And now you want me to walk out that door and go uphill and leave you sitting in a chair with 19. Yes, Claire said. Why, boy, because you're the only One who can shoot, she said. Duarte stopped. Ray's 61 with a bad knee, and he's going to be carrying Marcus's bag, Claire said. Marcus is going to have his hands in a wall. Priya's going to have her hands in somebody's chest. Danny's going to be opening a door he ran out of in March. She looked at him. That leaves you. Wes, at some point in the next hour, 6 people are going to be standing at the mouth of a hole in a mountain with their backs to 19 men. And somebody's got to be 400 meters behind them on the high ground telling them what's coming. That's your job, Duarte said. Oh? Yes, Claire said. It is. And that was when Wesley Duarte understood, and Claire watched it land on him, and it was terrible. You're giving me your job, he said. I'm giving you my job. Which you built that rifle with your hands. And I'm giving it to you, Claire said, because I'm going to be sitting at a kitchen table with my hands flat on the wood where a man can see them, and it isn't going to be in the closet where it's useless. It's going to be 400 meters up on that shoulder, doing what it was built for. And Wes, look at me. You're the only person on this earth I'd give it to. Duarte's face crumpled. Don't do this. 90 minutes, Claire said. That's all I'm asking. 90 minutes, and then it doesn't matter what happens in this kitchen, because that mountain will be closed forever, and Victor Kane will have spent 9 years and 19 men to buy a hill. At 1:12, Wesley Duarte picked up her rifle case off the kitchen table, and he did it the way you pick up a child, and he said, "If you die in this house, I will never forgive you." That's fine, Claire said. I mean it. Never. Not one day. Wes, that's fine. It's not fine, he shouted, and then immediately dropped his voice, and it came out wrecked. Reyes said, I've got you too, on the one, the way, the. He said it back to you. Do you remember that? Do you even remember that, Claire? He said it back, and everybody talks about what you did for him, and nobody ever says what he did for you, which is that he made you promise. He made you promise not to do exactly this. Claire couldn't speak. So promise me, Duarte said, right now in this kitchen. Wes, promise me. And Claire Whitmore looked at the man who'd spent 406 days of his life within arm's reach of her, and she lied to him for the first and last time in 12 years. I promise, she said. At 1:14, they were gone. The house went quiet in a way it had never been quiet, and Claire Whitmore stood alone in her kitchen with 5 empty chairs and did the only thing left to do. She pushed 4 of them in. She carried the 5th into the back bedroom. She washed 6 cups and dried them and put them in the cupboard, and she wiped the table, and she took the map off it and burned it in the sink and ran the water. And then she sat down in the one chair that was left with her hands flat on the wood, and she waited. Headlights came up the cut at 1:19. She didn't get up. Doors, boots, a lot of boots. Somebody tried her front door and found it unlocked, which Claire had done on purpose, and she heard the pause when they found it unlocked, and she smiled at absolutely nothing. Victor Kane walked into her kitchen at 1:21 in the morning. Well, he said, you're up. I'm up. That's disappointing. He pulled out a chair, the chair she hadn't pushed in, and she watched him not notice, and he sat down across her own table like a man visiting his aunt. I had a whole thing planned. I'm sure it was terrible. It was excellent, Kane said. It was going to be theater. Now it's a conversation. He set a folder on her table. Sign this. Claire looked at the folder. That's not 11 days, she said. No. You said 11 days. I said a lot of things, Kane said. Then you drove to Bozeman. Claire's stomach dropped 1,100 feet. You went and saw a dying old man, Kane said, and you were in his office for 98 minutes, and you came out of that building at 11:03 in the morning, and you sat down on the floor of a parking garage and cried for 11 minutes. And Claire, may I call you Claire? Claire, I want you to understand something about tonight. I didn't move up my timeline because you talked to Hawthorne. Then why? Victor Kane leaned back in her chair. Because you stopped crying, he said. The refrigerator hummed. Nobody stops, Kane said. That's the thing. That's the tell. I've been doing this for 31 years, and I have watched a lot of people sit down on a lot of floors, and they don't stop, Claire. They get up, they get carried, they get talked up by somebody. Nobody just stops and looks at their watch and stands up and walks 9 flights of stairs. He smiled. You cried for exactly 11 minutes, and then you went back to work. Do you know what that told me? Claire said, a thing. It told me you had already decided, Kane said. In the garage. sitting on the concrete. You decided and then you allocated 11 minutes to feeling something about it, and then the 11 minutes were up. He tapped the folder. That's not a woman I evict in 10 days. That's a woman I visit tonight. At 1:24, Claire Whitmore put her hands flat on the table and understood with total clarity that she was going to have to be better tonight than she had ever been at anything in her life. Sign it, Kane said. No. Claire. Victor, she said, sit back. He blinked. Sit back, she said. You've got 19 men and I've got a chair, and you came in here at 1:21 in the morning to have a conversation, so let's have one. But you don't get to slide paper at me for an hour like I'm a dentist from Seattle. She pushed the folder back across the table with 2 fingers. You want this mountain. I want to know what's in it. One of us is going to leave this table unhappy, and I've got nowhere to be. Victor Kane looked at her for a long, long moment. Then he laughed, really laughed, delighted the way he had through her truck window on the road. And he sat back and he crossed one ankle over his knee, and he said the most dangerous sentence anybody said all night. You know what Victor Kane said? I've got time. And 2 miles uphill in the dark, Marcus Bell put his hand on a 54-inch steel plug and found out that Sergeant Daniel Hawthorne had been telling the truth about exactly one thing and lying about another. Because the door was already open, and there were fresh boot prints going in. At 1:26, Marcus Bell keyed his mic twice and said one word. Open. Priya's voice came back low. Say again. The door is open, Bell said. Not unlocked. Open. There's 11 inches of gap, and there's prints going in, and they're wet. Nandakumar, they're from tonight. Danny Hawthorne came up beside him and stopped dead. That's not possible. Sergeant, I closed it in March. I closed it with my own hands. I pulled it to, and I turned the wheel, and Somebody opened it, Bell said. Nobody's been on that face in 6 weeks, Danny said, and his voice was climbing. Nobody. I've had eyes on that face every single night since May. That's my corner. That's the whole reason I asked for the corner. Ray Kowalski dropped Bell's bag in the dirt and crouched over the prints with a red light cupped in his palm, and he looked at them for 11 seconds, and then he said something that made every one of them go cold. That's one man, Kowalski said, and he's walking wrong. Wrong how? He's dragging a cane. At 1:28, 2 miles downhill, Victor Kane looked across a kitchen table and said, You want to know what's in it? Yes. Why? Because 11 men died over it, Claire said, and I'd like to know what for. That's a sentimental answer. It's the only kind I've got. Kane smiled. No, it isn't. Try again. Victor. Claire, you sat down in that chair at some point tonight, and you decided to talk to me instead of shoot me. And I want to be honest with you, that hurt my feelings a little. He tapped his knuckle on her table. Because I know what you are. So the only reason a woman like you talks is if talking is worth something, which means somebody's doing something. Claire's heart went through the floor. She did not move her hands. 19 men, she said. You brought 19 men to get a signature from a woman who lives alone. That's not confidence, Victor. That's the opposite. And Victor Kane paused. She watched him pause. She watched a man with 31 years of never being wrong take one small step off the path she'd needed him to leave, and she felt something in her chest that was almost pity. Say that again, he said. You heard me. No, I want to hear it again. 19 men, Claire said, for one woman. Either you're the most careful man alive, or somebody up that hill scares you. At 1:31, Kane's radio clicked. Corner, he said. Say status. Nothing. He waited 3 seconds. Corner. Nothing. Claire kept her hands flat on the wood and her face made of stone, and Victor Kane looked at her for a very long moment, and then he smiled, and it was the first honest thing he'd done all night. Well, he said, there it is. At 1:32, Danny went in first. Bell grabbed his carrier, and Danny tore loose without a word and went through 11 inches of gap into a corridor with warm light in it, and Marcus Bell said, God damn it, and went in after him. And Priya went in after Bell, and Ray Kowalski, 61 years old with a bad knee, stood at the mouth of a hole in a mountain for exactly 1 second and said out loud to nobody, 50 years and it's a hallway. Then he went in too. It was warm. That was the thing none of them were ready for. Not cold, not dead, not a tomb. warm and lit and humming, and there was a bulletin board 11 meters in with a softball schedule on it from June of 1976, and somebody had drawn a smiley face next to the word Tuesday. "Oh," Priya said quietly. "Oh no." "Don't look at it," Bell said. "Nandakumar, don't look at it. Move." They found him at 136. Colonel Richard Hawthorne was sitting on the floor of a corridor with his back against a wall and his cane across his knees, 74 years old and dying, and 1,100 feet inside a mountain he had guarded for 8 years and never once entered, and he was crying so hard he couldn't get air. Danny stopped like he'd hit glass. "Dad," the old man looked up. For 4 full seconds, neither of them made a sound. "You cut your hair," Hawthorne said. And Sergeant Daniel Hawthorne, 38 years old, dead since June of 2011, sat down on the floor of that corridor and put his forehead against his father's chest, and the old man put both hands on the back of his son's neck like a man holding water. "I'm sorry," Danny said. Dad, I'm sorry. Don't. I signed it. I signed a paper. They gave me a paper and Danny. I was 23. I thought I was doing what you did, I thought. Danny." Hawthorne got his son's face in both hands. "Listen to me. Look at me. 51 years I stood outside that door because a man told me not to ask. 51 years. And the day I finally asked, I got in my car and I drove 140 miles and I walked in here on a cane, and you wanted to know what I found. Dad." "A softball schedule," Hawthorne said. "A softball schedule, son. That's it. That's what I gave my life to. There's a coffee cup down that hall with lipstick on it. There's a jacket on a chair. There's nothing in this mountain, Mormon, but people who went to work one day and got forgotten, and I stood outside and let it eat you because I was too much of a coward to turn a handle." At 1:38, Marcus Bell said, "Sir, Colonel, sir, I need you to tell me, right now, did you touch anything?" "No." "Are you sure, son? I've been sitting on this floor for 40 minutes crying like a child," Hawthorne said. "I haven't touched a thing since 1971. Bell looked down the corridor. "Then who's running the lights?" he said. Nobody answered, and then the corridor said in a voice they all knew, "Hello, Danny." At 1:39, Sergeant Daniel Hawthorne came off that floor so fast he knocked his father sideways, and Ray Kowalski caught the old man, and Priya had her hand on Danny's carrier, and he dragged her 3 steps before she got her heels down. "Danny, that's him. Danny, that's him," Danny screamed, and his voice went all the way down that corridor and came back. That's the voice in March, He stopped. Everything stopped. Because he'd heard it, because they'd all heard it, because a corridor in a facility that a government forgot in 1976 had just spoken in the exact, unmistakable, perfectly relaxed voice of Victor Kane. "It's an intercom," Bell said slowly. "What?" "It's a PLO system, Sergeant." Bell was already moving, already tracing the run of it along the ceiling with his light. "There's a panel, there's a mic somewhere, and there's a panel, and he stopped. Oh, that son of a bitch." "Marcus," Priya said, "say it." "He was inside," Bell said. "In March, when you came in, he was standing 11 meters that way with a microphone in his hand, and he said your name, and you ran, and you've been sitting on a rock for 4 months telling yourself you're a coward." Danny Hawthorne made no sound at all. "He's been coming in here for years," Bell said. "Sergeant, he's been coming in here for years. He's the one keeping it lit. He put 19 men on a hill running radar over a wall for 9 years, looking for a way into a room he's been eating lunch in." "Why?" Priya whispered. And Richard Hawthorne from the floor said, "Because a man who tells 19 men the door is sealed is a man who never has to share it." At 1:41, Ray Kowalski said, "Then what's he need the deed for?" Nobody had an answer. Then Marcus Bell found the room. At 1:43, 2 miles downhill, Victor Kane stood up from Claire's kitchen table. "Sit down," Claire said. "Now see, that's interesting." He walked to her counter, opened a cupboard, looked at 6 clean cups. "That's very interesting, Claire." "Victor, how many chairs did this table have when I walked in?" Claire's hand stayed flat on the wood. "1," she said. You're standing in a woman's kitchen at 1 in the morning counting cups." "I'm standing in a woman's kitchen at 1 in the morning, Kane said, "and there's a wet ring on this counter, and 4 of them and none on the 5th, which means somebody dried them in a hurry and put them away wet. And I have been in this house for 22 minutes, and I've been enjoying myself so much I didn't look. He turned around. That's on me. That's fair. You earned that. Claire didn't move. How many? Kane said. Sit down. How many, Claire? Sit down, Victor. And Victor Kane picked up her radio off her own counter, the one Danny had left, and keyed it and said, all stations, north face now. He got 4 words out because at 1:44, 400 meters up the shoulder in the dark, Wesley Duarte put a round through the radio in Victor Kane's hand. The kitchen came apart. Kane went down and rolled and came up behind her stove with his hand ruined and blood on her floor. And he was laughing. He was actually laughing. And Claire Whitmore went out her own back door low and fast, while 19 men found out that there was a rifle on that mountain, and it was not in the house. Duarte in her ear. Move, you've got 4 on the porch. Wes, how many rounds? Enough. How many rounds? Claire, run. At 1:46, Marcus Bell stood in a room 1,100 feet inside a mountain and said, it's paper. What? It's paper, Bell said. Priya, it's paper. That's a filing room. That's 30,000 cubic feet of filing. He put his light on it. That's not a weapon. That's not materials. There's no bomb in this mountain. There's no bug. There's no gold. It's files. Priya said, files of what? And Richard Hawthorne, leaning on his son in a doorway he'd waited 51 years to stand in, said, people, everyone turned. Read one eye, the old man said. Bell pulled a folder, opened it, read for 11 seconds. Then he sat down on the floor. Marcus, Priya said. It's a name, Bell said. It's a name and a date and a form. It's a kid from Wisconsin, 1963, and there's a form in here that says he's dead, and there's a second form that says where they sent him, and there's a third form in 1971 that says program terminated, subject unrecovered. He looked up. Nandakumar, this is the machine. This is the whole machine, 65 years of people who signed a piece of paper in a tent and stopped existing, and every single one of them is in this room, filed alphabetically by a clerk who went home in 1976 and never came back. Danny Hawthorne walked into that room like a man walking into water. Sergeant, Bell said, don't. Danny went to the H. Sergeant. He found it in under a minute. He was very good at his job. He had always been very good at his job. He opened it and he stood there, and his father put a hand on his shoulder. It's me, Danny said, son. Dad, it's me. He was shaking. It's my form. It's my signature. It's the tent. There's a photograph of me at 23, and then there's a stamp, and the stamp says he stopped. What does it say? Hawthorne said. Danny Hawthorne looked up. It says recovered, he said. It says recovered. There's a date. It's this year. It's March. Nobody breathed. He filed me, Danny whispered. He came in here in March after I ran, and he filed me. He closed my file. He put me back in the drawer. And Ray Kowalski said, that's why he needs the deed. They all looked at him. 61 years old, and I'm the only one keeping up, Kowalski said. Think, people. It's not the files. Anybody can steal files. It's where they are. This is the only room on earth that proves any of this ever happened, and the second he owns the dirt over it, he doesn't own a warehouse. He owns the record. He owns whether it's real. He looked at the shelves. He's not going to sell it. He's going to be it. He's the last man with the phone, and when he's got the paper too, he's not a man anymore. He's the program. At 1:48, Marcus Bell stood up. Everybody out, he said. Marcus, everybody out, right now. Get the colonel out. Ray, take his other arm. Priya, my bag, the black one, and don't drop it. Marcus, you can't blow this, Priya said. There are names in here. There are families. There are mothers who buried. Priya, I know. Marcus, my cousin's name, could be in this room. Priya. Bell grabbed her by both shoulders. I know. I know exactly what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing it. Because there is nobody to give this to. There's no phone number. That's the whole point. That's what she told us in the kitchen. And if we walk out of here and leave this open, then in 6 months it belongs to whoever gets here next. And it'll be another Kane because it's always another Kane. Priya's face broke. So they stay forgotten, she said. No, Bell said. They stay safe. At 1:50, Claire Whitmore went over her own fence and put a man on the ground with her hands. and it took 9 seconds, and she didn't feel anything. Whit, talk to me. I'm at the wire. You're hit. I'm at the wire, Wes. Claire, I watched you get hit. Wes. She got her back against a post and looked down at herself and made a decision about what she'd seen. Where's Kane? He's moving, he's got 4 with him, and he's going uphill, and he is not running. Whit, he's walking up that cut like a man going to church. Claire closed her eyes. He's going to the door, she said. At 1:53, Marcus Bell set his charges in a corridor, so 11 meters inside a mountain, and he did it in 6 minutes and 11 seconds, and he did it with his hands perfectly steady. And afterward, he said it was the only thing he'd ever done that he was sure about. Sir, he turned. Colonel, I need you out. Son, I'm not. Colonel, with respect, you've had 51 years of not being able to fix it, Bell said. I've got 6 minutes. Get out of my hallway. And Richard Hawthorne laughed. He laughed, and it turned into a cough, and the cough went on too long, and Priya was on him instantly with her fingers on his throat and her face going wrong. Colonel, I'm all right. Sir, your pulses. Ma'am, I've got 11 months of liver, and I just walked into a mountain, Hawthorne said. Let me have this. At 1:57, Danny Hawthorne stood at the mouth of that door with his father's arm across his shoulders, and Victor Kane came up the last of the cut with 4 men and stopped 11 meters away and looked at them and smiled. Kid, Kane said. Danny didn't answer. You kid, come here. No, Danny said. Danny. Kane's voice went soft, warm, fatherly. It was the most obscene thing on that mountain. Danny, it's cold. You said you were cold. Come here, we'll get you warm. We'll get you home, kid. I've been trying to get you home for 15 years. You said my name, Danny said. Kane stopped. In March, Danny said, you were standing behind that panel with a microphone in your hand and you said, hello, Danny, and you watched me run out of that door and throw up behind a rock, and then you walked out and picked up my cigarette. Silence. Say it, Danny said. Kid, say it. And Victor Kane, who had never in 31 years been asked to say anything he didn't want to, shrugged. You were going in, he said. I needed you not to. That's it. That's it, kid, Kane said. That's all of it. You were the best man I ever had, and you'd have gone in and read a film, and I'd have lost you in 11 minutes. So I said your name. He smiled. You want an apology? I do it again tonight. I do it again right now. And Colonel Richard Hawthorne, dying on a cane at the mouth of a door he'd guarded for 8 years, said, get away from my son. Kane looked at him. Colonel, he said pleasantly, you made it. I made it. After 51 years. After 51 years. Was it worth it? Kane said. Honest question. You gave a life to a hallway. Was it worth it? And the old man said, it's got my boy standing in it. At 1:59, Victor Kane raised his hand to give an order, and Claire Whitmore said from 4 meters behind him in the dark, Victor. Nobody moved. Don't turn around, she said. Claire. I said don't turn around. You're bleeding, Kane said. I can hear it. That's Claire, that's a lot. Tell your men to put them down. Or what? He was smiling. She could hear it. Or your friend on the shoulder, he's 400 meters out and there's 4 of us and he can't take 4. He doesn't have to take 4, Claire said. He has to take 1. And Victor Kane went absolutely still. You've been thinking about this for 22 minutes, Claire said. You figured out the cups at 1:43. That's 90 minutes late. You gave me 90 minutes at my own kitchen table because you enjoyed yourself, Victor. Because for 31 years, nobody's ever been interesting. And I sat there and I let you have the best conversation you have had in a decade. And the whole time, there was a man with a duffel bag 2 miles uphill. Claire, put them down. Claire, listen to me. And for the first time all night, Victor Kane's voice changed. Listen, there is nothing in that mountain worth this. It's paper. It's names. Who cares? Who cares, Claire? They've been forgotten for 65 years and nobody came looking. That's my whole point. That's the only thing I ever understood, that nobody else did. Nobody's coming. Nobody has ever been coming. So I stayed. I'm the only one who stayed. So did he, Claire said. What? He stayed too, she said. 51 years. Same job, same silence, same nobody coming. Her voice did not shake. You both got left, Victor. You both got forgotten by the exact same machine on the exact same day. He held a door for people who never called him back, and you took a phone off a dead man's desk and started calling other people. Silence. That's the whole difference, Claire said. That's it. That's the entire difference between you and that old man, and it's the only thing that's ever mattered on this mountain. Nobody breathed. Put them down, Claire said, and Victor Kane said no, and turned. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Sheriff Wesley Duarte, 400 meters up the shoulder with a rifle a woman had built with her own hands over 4 years and given away in a kitchen, took one, and Claire Whitmore took the other 3. It took 11 seconds. She would never talk about it. Not to Duarte, not to Priya, not to the state investigator with the nice tie, not ever, not once for the rest of her life. Ray Kowalski watched the whole thing from 11 meters away, and the only thing he ever said about it, ever to anyone, was to his wife 3 years later at their kitchen table when she asked him why he still drove to Montana every October. He said, "Because I saw what somebody's daughter can do." Marcus Bell dropped the corridor at 2:04. He put 11 meters of granite where a hallway used to be, and he did it clean, and he did it right, and the mountain took it. The way a mountain takes everything with one deep sound, and then nothing, and then it was just a hill again, and it had never been anything else, and it never would be again. 65 years of forgotten people went into the dark and stayed there. And Priya Nandakumar stood at the mouth of it and said out loud, "You're not forgotten. 6 people know. 6 people know you were there." And that was the funeral. Colonel Richard Hawthorne died on the 14th of November, 4 months later, in a bed in Bozeman, and his son was holding his hand. That's the whole sentence. That's all of it. He didn't die on a mountain, and he didn't die guarding anything, and he didn't die alone in an office with a folder in his desk. He died in a bed with his boy's hand in his, and 11 minutes before he went, he opened his eyes and said, "Danny, I'm here, Dad. You're here. I'm here." "Huh," said Richard Hawthorne, and he sounded like a man who'd just been told something wonderful and then he went to sleep. Claire Whitmore stood at the back of that funeral and did not go up front and did not take a flag, and afterward a man in a suit, who did not give her a name, came up beside her and said quietly, "That's a hell of a piece of land you've got, Miss Whitmore." And Claire said, "It's a hill. I hear it used to be something." "It's a hill," Claire said, and looked at him, and the man looked back at her for 4 seconds, and then decided something and walked away, and was never seen in Redmond County again. Marjorie Pike came back from a fishing cabin on Boulder Creek on a Sunday afternoon with a bad hip and $200 and a note in her purse, and she went back to work Monday and pushed her chair in at 11:30 and walked to the diner, same as always. She told everybody who'd listen that a nice young man had carried her groceries. She never once in the 11 years she had left told a single soul what was on the 1961 page. Sheriff Dale Ammons signed his last report in December. 4 men, it said, deceased, trespass on private land. Redmond Ridge caused pending jurisdiction unresolved. He never resolved it. He sat with that report on his desk for 6 days, and then he put it in a drawer and closed the drawer. And when the state man came and asked him about the woman on the mountain, Ammons looked him in the eye and said, "She's a rancher." "That's it. She's a rancher," Sheriff Ammons said. "And this is a county where people mind their own business. And if you'd like to know how 4 men ended up on private property at 2 in the morning, 9 miles from any road, you might start with the fact that they crossed a fence a woman built with her own hands, and she asked them not to." Deputy Trent Bowers drove up Redmond Ridge on a Tuesday in April 1 year later and sat in his truck for a long time before he got out. Claire came out on the porch. "Deputy." "Ma'am." He took his hat off. He'd never done that. "I got something I've been carrying." "You don't have to." "No, ma'am, I do." Bowers looked at his boots. "You told me about that elk, the neck, too. You said 200 yards in the dark, and I laughed at you. I stood in your yard, and I laughed at a woman about the thing she was best at in the world, and then I went in the diner and I told it as a story." Claire said nothing. "And I've thought about it every day for a year," Bowers said. "Because if I'd listened, ma'am, if I'd listened for 11 seconds, if I'd just listened, Deputy, maybe none of it." "Trent." Claire came down 2 steps. "Look at me. You want absolution? I don't have any. What I've got is a fence that's 4 miles long, and I'm 51 years old before I get it all rebuilt alone." Bowers looked up. You want to help me build a fence, Claire said. He was there at 7 the next morning. He was there every Saturday for 9 years. They came in June, the first ones. 4 of them veterans, 22 and 24, and 30 and 41, sent by Priya, who sent everybody because Priya Nanda Kumar had decided in a corridor inside a mountain that she was never going to let another person be filed and forgotten as long as she was breathing. They slept in the barn. They fixed the barn. They fixed each other mostly, which was the whole point, and nobody ever said out loud. Ray Kowalski came every October and complained about the coffee. Marcus Bell came at Christmas and never once in 20 years talked about what he'd read in the 11 seconds he stood in that room. He carried it. That was the arrangement. 6 people, 6 shares. Wesley Duarte brought his daughter when she was 11, and she asked Claire why the mountain had a flat spot on the north face, and Claire said, "There was a door there once." What was behind it? People, Claire said, who went to work one day. What happened to them? And Claire Whitmore knelt down in front of an 11-year-old girl and said, somebody stayed with them, all the way to the end. That's what happened to them. And Danny Hawthorne lived. That's the part that mattered. That's the part Claire would have told you was worth the whole thing if you'd ever gotten her to say anything about it at all, which you wouldn't have. He got his name back the hard way over 4 years with lawyers and hearings and a woman named Whitmore who sat in the gallery of every single one and never said a word. And on a Thursday in 2030, the United States Marine Corps officially acknowledged that Sergeant Daniel R. Hawthorne had not died in Helmand Province in June of 2011. He was 38 when it started. He was 42 when it ended. He was the second best shot on that mountain, and he never once minded. And he stood at his father's grave on the 11th of June every year with his hat in his hands, and he never smoked another cigarette as long as he lived. Claire asked him once on the porch late why he'd stayed on the corner all those weeks instead of just leaving. And Danny said, because you rebuilt the fence. That's not an answer, Sergeant. Ma'am, Danny said, it's the only one I've ever had. Some people buy land to get away from a war. Claire Whitmore bought 3,000 acres of Montana and found out that the war had gotten there first 50 years ahead of her and had been sitting in the dark the whole time waiting for somebody to notice. And a lot of men decided, looking at a woman alone on a mountain, that nobody would. They were wrong about her the way men had been wrong about her for her whole life, quietly, comfortably, and completely. She didn't argue. She never argued. She just put the fence back up alone in the dark. And when they crossed it, she was exactly what she had always been, and the mountain kept them. Because peace is not a place you buy. It's a thing somebody stands in front of. And on the 11th of June every year, in a county in Montana that minds its own business, a woman walks the north face of a hill that used to have a door in it, and she checks the wire, and she checks the posts, and she goes home. The guardian never left. She was just waiting for somebody to cross the fence.